this vision that Stanton High School could be different. I believe it can be.
That's Margaret Hallowell. Pretty soon it'll be Michael Hallowell.
What shall we call you?
Michael.
Beautiful. There is a very real chance that we will fail very badly. But I believe in all of you.
Hello once again, watchers of Good TV. My name is Nick Pell, and this is my review of Rise. Unfortunately, just the series. So this is technically the review of Rise Season 1. I was really hoping that this show would get renewed for a second season on NBC. Unfortunately, it has been canceled. It breaks my heart that it has been canceled because I really enjoyed the show. But that's how it is, so I'll be talking about the show in its entirety. I'll be going to spoilers here or there, so just know that if you have not watched the full 10-episode series. And then I'll also be touching briefly on the finale, what I maybe would have hoped for the show to do in the future with Season 2 and onwards from there. But let's talk about it. So Rise mainly stars Josh Radnor from How I Met Your Mother fame. He played Ted on that show, and many years later after that, he is now the star of Rise. And on the show, he is an English teacher who decides to get involved in the drama department, and he basically ends up taking it over. He becomes the new director, and instead of doing some general high school-esque show like Grease or something, he decides, let's do Spring Awakening, because that's not controversial at all. And if you did not pick up on that sarcasm, the show is actually very controversial. It has a lot of very mature-esque themes. It has homosexuality, it has murder, it has suicide, it has abortion, it has a lot of these things which teenagers and high schoolers and parents of said high schoolers would not necessarily think is appropriate and not necessarily want to have displayed on stage. His assistant director is played by Rosie Perez. She is Tracy, and she is a person who has actually been in the drama department for the last 20 years. She has been the director, essentially, of it for the last 20 years. And so Lou essentially just comes in, takes her spot, and she has some issues with that that come up throughout the course of the show. But very generally, I enjoyed the working relationship. I thought both actors did a very good job at doing their individual performances. Neither of them actually do any like acting on stage in the show because they're the directors. But I thought that their performances and how they were able to bond with the kids on stage and really show that emotion really worked well. The idea of doing Spring Awakening, which is not a show that I was initially familiar with, honestly, is also something which I really like that the show did. Because it is a controversial show. It didn't just do a musical TV show just to do a musical TV show. They decided to take a risk with it and do the Spring Awakening show, which has a lot of mature themes, like I said. I thought that the show tackled those themes pretty well for the most part. It expanded them somewhat to the outside world, away from the actual show itself. So you got to see some of those themes play out in real life, in real time, as opposed to just in general rehearsals. For instance, there's a character who ends up getting pregnant on the show, and so she has to decide, oh hey, am I going to keep the kid or am I going to abort it? And so that's an issue which takes place more in the second half of the show, and then it becomes a bigger and bigger issue as the show goes on, as you would imagine. There's a character named Simon who is very religious. He comes from a very religious family, and they're very conservative religious, so they're not really big into the homosexuality, gay stuff, or anything of that sort. And so when Simon gets cast as a character who ends up having to kiss another boy in the show, his family obviously has issues with that. Simon doesn't have as big of issues, and I really like the character development that they had for him as he began to explore who he is really as a person outside of his family's faith and his family's home. And it kind of explores sexuality to an extent. I'm probably going to butcher this, but auli'i Caravallo, she is the person who voiced and starred as Moana in the Disney movie. She is Lilette in this TV show, and she actually does a very good job. She plays this daughter of this waitress, single mother, and so she has her own kind of issues to deal with. She is a very timid star initially when she is cast in the role of this lead character of Spring Awakening, but she eventually really just comes into her own as a character, and I really enjoyed seeing her develop as a character as well throughout the course of the 10 episodes. Alongside her is her eventual boyfriend, famous star football player Robbie, played by David Gillespie. And I thought he also did a good job. I like seeing his character arc come into play as he basically had to decide what was eventually more important to him. Playing football, which is something which he's a natural talent at, or being an actor and singing, which is something which he has grown to love over the course of the season. And I really like seeing that conflict play out because while at times it did seem a little bit cheesy, I like seeing how his father was involved in it to an extent. And how he didn't really support the whole singing thing because he wanted Robbie focus on what you're good at, focus on what's going to get you money eventually. And so it became an issue of, oh hey, do what either it makes sense or do what's going to make you happy in the long run. It became kind of a play on that, and I think that his relationship with Lillette also helped to fuel that. I really enjoyed seeing their characters. The last two characters that I really want to touch on is Gwen and Gordy because they're the other two that really are connected throughout the course of the season. Gwen's father, who is the football coach, ends up having an affair and gets divorced from her mother, and Gwen has her own feelings about this because she is just an interesting character. You don't really know what's going on inside Gwen's brain because she's very, very close to the chest with how she keeps secrets to herself. She'll lash out at her mom at times, she'll lash out at her father, but it's really Gordy who ends up being her kind of stick in the mud per se, because he's a guy who is Lou's son, Lou, Josh Radnor's character, and he has a drinking problem. You start to see this over the course of the first half of the season. He eventually acknowledges it, decides to get help for alcohol abuse. And during the midst of this whole session where he's starting to realize that he has a problem and he's in recovery, he starts to get closer to Gwen, who he's been crushing on for the majority of the season, but that actually starts to become something of an item after they hang out over the course of a night and just kind of go back and forth over the course of the rest of the season. So I really did enjoy their storylines. I thought Gwen's was going to actually play out in a different way. I thought that she was going to be more or less a reflection of a certain character in Spring Awakening, and it would be a lot more of a tragic situation. But it did not happen that way, so I was kind of pleasantly surprised by that. The last really positive thing I want to talk about with the show is the music. I thought that all the singing and all of those aspects were very, very well done. I really enjoyed seeing weekly just different songs being dealt with, seeing how they came along, and then ultimately with the finale, which I'll touch on in more detail later in a moment here. I thought that with that finale being primarily the show itself, I really enjoyed seeing all his performances and seeing the whole thing come together and come alive. It was really cool to see that process. Some quick things that I just had slight issues with. I felt like the show was a little bit predictable in general. It had its issues with trying to be censored by the PTA and by the principal, and just a lot of things which hampered the show itself. But at the end of the day, you know that the finale is going to be opening night, and you know it's going to probably be the original version of the show that Lou wanted to do, and it was. And so any real big conflicts in regards to the show that we saw, I was never really that concerned about because I figured, oh hey, it's all going to probably work out how it's supposed to in the end. The last real big issue, which I didn't personally have a big thing with, but a lot of people that I saw online commenting on the show really had an issue with Josh Radnor's Lou character. And it makes sense for why people had issues with him, because he is this really overambitious, musically loving teacher who wants to go into this drawing department and just pull off a Broadway-esque performance. He wants to have this elaborate stage, he wants to have the perfect orchestra, and it really takes him a lot of episodes to come down to the real world and realize you can't really do all that with a high school budget and one which is barely being supported. So while I personally enjoyed seeing his overambitiousness take over at times and seeing him just really want to go for the best possible show, which I think makes sense, I understand why a lot of people saw him as just this guy who was just completely unrealistic and thus not very fun to watch on screen. My last issue is kind of a general one. It got canceled. I hate that it got canceled because AP Bio got canceled, which I also reviewed, which I also enjoyed, but I think that this show is a much stronger show. It deals with a lot bigger issues, a lot more mature issues. I think it's a show which deserved a second season, at least that. So now I'm going to touch briefly on the finale of Rise. If you have not seen the finale yet, probably click away now. Know that I really enjoyed the show. Come back after you've seen the finale. Now, as I said, the finale of this show was opening night. We got to see Spring Awakening, at least a lot of the main sections which we saw rehearsed through the last 9 episodes. And before we actually got to the show itself, we have the principal coming in. He tells Lou, oh hey, take out that beating scene. We just don't want it in there at all. And at this point, Lou has taken out basically every controversial part of this show just to appease the PTA, appease the principal so he can keep his job. And so this is the straw that broke the camel's back, essentially. Lou is just fed up at this point. The principal leaves and tells the cast, let's do the original show. what the hell? And so they put all the bad stuff, back into the show, and they do the original show. And so, as you would expect, it becomes like this big hit. While people have, like, obviously some issues with it when it starts up because they see all this mature content. As the show goes on, you see people really being just enveloped in it and really enjoying it and being drawn into it. And yet at the end of the episode, we have the superintendent come backstage towards the end of the show and tell Lou, I love the show, I think what you did is fantastic, but we have to cut the drama department and the drama program, and so this is the last performance. Sorry, it's a budget thing. And that's basically where the show leaves off. I didn't touch on a lot of different plot lines because I didn't want to get this super long as a review. If you want to know any of my thoughts on other characters or anything of that sort, leave in the comments. I'll be happy to comment. But I just wish the show could have ended on a better note. I wish they would have at least known that they were not going to get a season 2. Because I feel like, at least with season 2, since the drama department got cut at Stanton, they would have started a community theater. They would have had more freedom to do what they wanted to do. They still would have been up against a conservative community, so if they had done something like Heathers or what have you, they still would have had backlash from parents and everything. But it would have made for an interesting show if eventually this community theater ends up being one of the most popular things in Stanton and brings in a lot of money, a lot of press, a lot of business, all that type of stuff, and just eventually becomes the biggest selling point, outdoing the football team or something. I think that would have been really interesting. I would have loved to see where all these characters could have gone in future seasons, and seeing what they would have done with the show once these kids graduate. If they would have stuck around, or if they would have left the show, they would have brought in new people like Glee did. I don't know, unless the show gets picked up by a new network or something like that, you'll probably never find out. And so, guys, those are my thoughts on Rise, the series, season 1. I really enjoyed it. As I said, I really wish it hadn't gotten canceled. It was one of my favorite new shows of the year. But what can you do? As always, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on Rise as a show down in the comments as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And as always, people, my name is Nick Pell. And once again, keep on watching.